let's do this Q&A. Let's jump right in. I don't want to waste any of your time, and I promise to do more of these because these are fun. So we're going to have some fun with it, and I'll do the very best I can to answer them. And in full transparency, the way I operate. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to say, I don't know. And it's something I'll look deeper into, and then maybe in a future video, I can revisit that particular question and give you greater context and insight to your question. So I've got them. These are all from Facebook. The ones that I have so far today, and I just asked today, and some came in, so thank you. They're all going to be from my personal Facebook page. If you're not one of my Facebook friends, followers, whatever they're called now, then by all means do that. Link below. And from my Masters Bodybuilding group. So let's start diving into some questions. Sam asks, if a person was starting their body recomp and taking back their life from a place of being way overweight, would you still incorporate carb cycling in their diet plan? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all about volume. It's all about the amount of carbohydrate you're taking in relative to your energy demands. We can call it a energy deficit. We can call it a caloric deficit. I'm not afraid of the word calories like many in the carnivore, keto, and low carb space are. You have to assign a trackable unit of measure to the food that you're taking in. Just to give a blanket term of volume of food can be confusing to people. So I don't care if you call them calories. I don't care if you call them snarkles. I don't care if you call them widge whackers, whatever you call them. If the goal is a reduction of body fat, then you want to be in a caloric deficit, but still making sure that there's a strict adherence to a certain macros requirement, because that does play a role for hormonal health. So contrary to what many people have said over the years, if you're in a caloric deficit and you're eating nothing but, fast food, donuts, and pizza, the food quality of that is total garbage and the end result is going to be poor. Whereas if you consume nutrient-dense whole foods slightly below what your daily requirement is, factoring in output, i.e. exercise, training, cardio, whatever, or just how active your job is, then these numbers matter. And so that's why it's very important to track, especially if you have a very specific, or what I like to even call an extreme physique goal, then you got to know where you're at. So tracking your calories, your macros are vitally important. Can you do carb cycling? Well, absolutely. So if you find what your maintenance level is, meaning you eat a certain volume of clean single ingredient whole foods over the course of perhaps 4 to 6 weeks, and you have no change in body composition, then your body has more than likely adjusted to that level of intake based on your output, and you're somewhere around your maintenance. And coaches out there that can just, throw some arbitrary calculation at you and say, this is your number. Don't believe that. That's inaccurate. You still need to, yes, set a caloric ceiling, set a division of macros, and then track that over 4 to 6 weeks and track the result and make adjustments from there. That's what I do as a coach with all the people that I work with. I will assign numbers based on my 30 years of experience working with thousands of people. We will track that, see what the result is, and then make adjustments in real time based on what the client's goal is. So let's say that you are trying to lose body fat, but hold on to precious muscle to set up maybe a gain phase down the road, which is smart. Then yes, consuming some carbohydrate, some protein, and a smaller amount of fat based on a slight decrease in what your total expenditure is at maintenance will produce a result in body fat reduction. Here's the important thing to consider. You have to choose your energy components. Like me, for example, when I switched over to carb cycling, I understand the physiology of this. You don't want competing energy sources. You don't want high levels of carbohydrate or even moderate levels of carbohydrate and high or moderate levels of fat at roughly the same amount competing against each other. Then, especially if you're trying to lose body fat, this can get in the way. So if you are like every physique competitor out there, pro and amateur, high level athletes, or let's say bodybuilding enthusiasts, they don't compete, but they want to have the most awesome extreme physique possible, You have to choose what your dominant macronutrient is. And to be completely terrified of carbohydrates, like there's some satanic macros that's, as they say in the low carb world, going to immediately store as body fat is just exquisite BS, as I like to say. I've been trying to clean up the language a little bit, so I've shortened into BS. So when you're consuming, you want to generally keep your protein at a consistent level each day for the most part. And there are some nuances there as well, especially as you get to a higher level. So for me, I like to generally assign 1 to 1.2. And if you're a muscular bodybuilder, big guy, maybe even up to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass, or you can even use per pound of goal weight or ideal weight. That generally works very well. And then track that, see how that does for you. And then with carbohydrate, generally somewhere in the area of 2 grams per pound of lean body mass or goal weight or ideal weight works well also. But then you want to keep the fat a little bit lower because you don't want those competing energy sources fighting amongst each other. Because then it would be easier to store the fat into body fat because you have the energy component of carbohydrate present in the blood. And it's trying to convert solely into muscle glycogen. Now, the insulin people, the people that demonize insulin all over social media. Oh, insulin's a storage hormone. It's an evil satanic hormone that's going to that's just going to store everything as fat. That's highly intellectually dishonest and doesn't even remotely adhere to scientific principles, the way the body works. So what happens is you use insulin, which is a very powerful, necessary hormone that does wonderful things in the body if used properly. You can choose to allow insulin to either drive carbohydrate into the muscle to store as muscle glycogen, or if you take in a bunch of crap shit foods or have these competing energy sources of fat and carbohydrate in excess, then the body is going to choose or use insulin to take the unnecessary amounts and store it as additional body fat. So this is why tens of thousands of bodybuilders and bodybuilding enthusiasts, high-level athletes, strength training athletes, jujitsu players, MMA fighters, NFL players, CrossFitters, you name it, do very well on carbohydrate because they're utilizing that carbohydrate as a usable energy source. And by insulin pushing that carbohydrate into the muscle as glycogen to fuel athletic performance or just your regular workout that you do through the week, it's going to fill that muscle with glycogen to be used for high intensity muscular contractions. And it's not going to just immediately spill over as body fat. You just want to keep the fat a little bit lower. So this is why every athlete, as I mentioned, for decades have been using carbohydrate in that approach. They just do it intelligently to make sure that the volume is not spilling over to more than the body can utilize. And then any more than that would then store as body fat. But carbohydrates have to go through a pretty expensive physiological process to store as body fat, whereas fats, it's a simpler process. So that's why you don't want to be carbing up or using carbohydrates from things that contain both fat and carbohydrate, like pizza and burgers and donuts and garbage, things of that nature. You definitely want to keep the seed oils out of the mix. They're one of the biggest culprits in the decline of health and the rise in morbid obesity. So even if you are overweight and trying to lose weight, you can definitely incorporate carbohydrate. I would highly recommend, if you're not, to become a very active individual, go to the gym 2, 3, 4 days a week, do some general strength training, do a little bit of cardiovascular exercise for conditioning and heart health and longevity. Meet your protein requirements daily for cellular repair, muscle growth, and the preservation of muscle. You just have to find an amount of carbohydrate that's not going to be in excess to then spill over because you're taking more than your body needs or expends through activity in daily life. or what's called NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the amount of expenditure that you exert throughout the day just doing daily life, doing your job, cleaning the house, organizing your sock drawer, whatever the case may be. So find the number that works for you. So you implement roughly said macros division, and then you track that over the 4 to 6 weeks. And if you find that you're dropping some body fat, you'll also probably find, because of this structured way of eating, that you're probably preserving some lean muscle mass, and things will start to work into your favor. There have been millions of people over decades and decades who have gotten really lean from a higher place of stored body fat with the ingestion of carbohydrates. There are many bodybuilders, strength training aficionados, and athletes who, in the off season, put on quite a bit of body fat because they want to lift heavier weight, they want to pack on more muscle, and then they go through the process of titrating down calories and slowly titrating down the level of intake from the three macronutrients to create that deficit to where body fat comes off. And, I'll use me as an example. I went through a 7-month contest prep, as many do, throughout that entire 7 months, with the exception of 2 weeks out. There was 1 week, 2 weeks out from the stage, where there were a couple days that I reduced carbohydrate to near zero. And that was just to empty glycogen, try to, I was already super lean. So I was trying to get that extremely stubborn last little bit of body fat off. So we go through that strategy of depleting glycogen right at the end, and then coming into the final week, what athletes or bodybuilders call peak week. Then we start to reload that glycogen once again, and then it goes intercellularly into the muscle, stores as glycogen, fills you out, and gives you that great look of fullness. You're striated, you're vascular, you see all the definition, and you take in an amount that doesn't spill over and cause you to put on weight. Now, one thing to consider, many people who have been on a low carb carnivore diet, or even vegans, if any of you are watching this, which is doubtful, when you do take in carbohydrate, if you've not been taking them in for a while, understand that your body will respond happily by holding on to more intercellular fluid, water. So for every gram of glycogen that you have in your body, you have roughly like 2.3 grams of water that support that glycogen in the muscle. But this is very helpful for having that full look, and it also aids in performance. Obviously, making sure you get the right electrolyte balance, keep your sodium intake solid, then it works extremely well. What many might find is, after making these adjustments in calories and macronutrients, that they might see a slight bump up on the scale, even as body fat is coming off. Because let's say you're completely glycogen depleted and you step on the scale at 175 pounds, and then you bring in a structured amount of carbohydrate that is going to be beneficial for you and actually produce a phenomenal result. Remember now that you're not going to keep dumping water all the time. You're not going to be holding on to more water. So when you stand on the scale might be up a pound, but that's just the excess fluid that you're holding to that holds the carbohydrate. And it's not going to have a negative appearance factor. It's all intercellular, it's within. So, that's why sometimes people freak out. They might say to me, I don't understand. I've put on 2 pounds, but I've lost a pant size. I look better. I'm seeing my musculature. Things are better, but I've gained weight. Well, you haven't gained weight. You're just holding on to water, which is a positive thing. So that's why scale obsessed people generally don't do well long term, because they don't understand the physiological process of what's happening within their body. So, and also the final point is, remember, if you're consuming carbohydrate as single ingredient whole foods, there's nothing wrong with it. You're not going to ruin your health. Now, obviously, if you're metabolically deranged, you're insulin resistant, you're pre-diabetic, you have major, metabolic disorder from years or decades of abuse, then you might want to keep the carbohydrate a little lower, be very conservative as you start to sprinkle it back in, start low, slowly titrate up, and find the amount that works for you. But, there are a million bodybuilders and athletes out there who ingest carbohydrate every single day, some at a very high level, and they just get leaner and harder and more muscular, look better, and they're physical appearance visually is fantastic, even though the scale might not be changing very much. So also it's a really great environment for putting on lean muscle. And remember the kindergarten math problem that I often give to new clients. If you put on 2 pounds of lean muscle, that's a phenomenal thing. If you lose 2 pounds of fat in that process, that's a phenomenal thing. That's making a very big change in your body. And the net result on the scale is going to be zero because you've added two and you subtracted two, added two good stuff, subtracted two bad stuff, but the net result on the scale is zero. So don't be scale obsessed. Just continue down the path of fueling your body with single ingredient whole foods with an intelligent division of macros. That's why I only consume things like white rice, cream of rice, potato, rice cakes, maybe a little bit of raw honey, some organic fruit, and certain vegetables that agree with me that don't upset my stomach. And every once in a while, I'll even do some oats. Just find the foods that work for you and go through that experiment and find that adjustment period. And then what will happen is generally you're taking in a little bit more food, you're filling the muscles with glycogen, you're fueling performance, and you're training your metabolism to be working at a greater rate. And also, very, very low carbohydrate for many produces an excess of fight or flight hormones like cortisol. That's not a good thing. Sometimes long-term super low carb diets can cause disruption in electrolyte balance, thyroid issues, not for everybody, but for a lot. And I've experienced this as a coach over many years. So yes, long-winded answer to a simple question. You can lose weight if you have a lot of weight to lose with the intake of carbohydrate. Now, remember with carb cycling, on off days from training, you want to take in less carbohydrate. Most of your training days are moderate carbohydrate, and depending on the individual, your hardest training day, we actually bring in even more carbohydrate and call that a high day. Some days, some people, I don't put the high day in right out of the gate. First, we have to get through the necessary adjustments and then boost that metabolic rate a little bit and get your body in a metabolic environment where it can handle that high day. And that high day actually becomes a very beneficial thing that's like throwing gas on a fire to keep that fat loss going and make everything better. So hope that answers your question. Okay, next up. What is your opinion on carnivore increasing cortisol and adrenaline in regard to blood pressure? High carb proponents have believed without carbs, the body goes into fight or flight response. This is actually a true thing for many, not all, but many. The absence of carbohydrate and the ingestion of a lot of fat, especially if you're in a severe caloric deficit or not fueling your body often enough, can result in the overproduction of stress hormones like cortisol and can have things like sleep disruption, certain levels of endocrine disruption. I've had people come to me and say, many times, it's not just one off outlier. Dozens and dozens of times people would come to me that have been in long-term ketosis, long-term low carb, and they've had the blood work to support it that showed they had a massive elevation in cortisol, thyroid disruption. Things were kind of going haywire. So we slowly brought in and introduced a small amount of carbohydrate, generally at first around training, and then slowly kept increasing that number, lowering the fat a little bit, and everything leveled off and things got better. And in my experience, that was the predominant amount of the people that came to me expressing those issues. There were some outliers where it gave no change at all. It turns out that their biggest problem was just not taking in enough food, and long-term caloric deficits can be extremely disruptive as well. So if you're always chronically dieting and not getting enough food, this can produce lackluster results and diminishing returns. So make sure that you're well fed and you take your fat loss seasonal. I don't recommend anybody being in a severe deficit longer than 12 weeks. Then you take a diet break, refeed the body, recomp muscle, and then go through a period of gain phase that's structured properly, just slightly over caloric maintenance to create a better environment to pack on muscle, and then repeat the process. So hopefully that helps. Okay, what do we got? Carb cycling for dummies. What would you do if you traveled 3 to 4 days a week all around the country? There are so many people that travel that are super busy that can eat some carbohydrates. I mean, it's not like it's some elusive macronutrient that doesn't exist out there. There are pro level bodybuilders who are in massive demand. They're being called all over the country for photo shoots. even internationally. They're doing guest posing appearances. They have sponsorship obligations and they're always on the move. They're traveling for shows and they always make sure that they have their food ready. It could be something as investing in a meal prep company that specializes in meals that you can custom build around whatever your current way of eating and goals are. Or how about this? You go into some sort of a restaurant. I'm not talking McDonald's, Wendy's, or Bojangles, and you tell whomever is serving you that you would like some chicken breast and some rice. You know, you want a filet mignon and a baked potato. I mean, that food is still out there, even if you're traveling. Yes, you may have to work a little harder at it. You may have to inconvenience yourself slightly and add this into your schedule and be prepared and maybe make look into the future and see where you're going and develop a plan of attack of to where you can eat to special order the foods that are going to benefit you. And once again, that is just single ingredient whole foods, lean meats, clean single ingredient carbohydrates, or fresh whole fruit to some degree, and vegetable intake that doesn't disagree with your digestive tract. So it's just effort. Anything, when you're trying to change your body to an extreme level and look the absolute best you can, you've immediately dropped yourself into the 5% of the population, maybe less, that is actually actively trying to be a freak, as I call it, the freak in the room. And those people are going to have to try harder. They're going to have to find places to work out. They're going to have to find places to eat properly and fuel their body. They might have to meal prep and find a microwave. They might be out doing cardio in an unknown place, around the neighborhood of their hotel. They're going to have to make sure that they get their ass back to the room and prioritize their sleep. The plan doesn't change just because you're traveling. Millions of people travel, millions of people work it out, and they make it work for them. So, when carnivore based, what's with all the carnivores? I thought they all hated me now. When carnivore based and you are either carb cycling or rather timing a carb intake around training, what have you found through experience is the best carbs to take in? Same rules apply. Single ingredient whole foods, jasmine rice, cream of rice, sweet potatoes, baked potatoes, rice cakes, certain starchy vegetables that don't disagree with your digestion or your gut flora. Fruit, preferably organic, things like berries and apples, and maybe even a date or a figs. Pineapple is great for digestion. I try to get that in a couple of times a week. It's a miracle worker. I mean, and then if you don't, if you want to stay adherent, as I did many years ago, to more of a cyclical carnivore diet where you're utilizing carbohydrate to fuel athletic performance and training, which is an extremely smart thing to do, then I would have the bulk of my carbohydrate around training, pre-workout, possibly even intra-workout, taking in like a specialized cyclic dextrin carbohydrate drink during training, and then post-workout. And even if you're carb cycling and you're having carbohydrate at every single meal throughout the day, let's say you're like me and you're having 5 meals a day, I still make sure that my biggest intake or my biggest volume of food, especially carbohydrate, because I keep protein pretty consistent, is pre and post workout. That's when the biggest whacks of food are coming in. So yes, that's how I would do that. Let's see. Jason wants to know, are steroids bad for you? It depends. Every question on earth should be answered with "it depends" and then qualified. Here's the bottom line with that. I know for an absolute fact, because I'm in the loop, that there are IFBB pros, top amateurs fighting for a pro card, that their whole life is bodybuilding, that take in less exogenous hormones than the guys over at the local hardcore gym buying God knows what in an alley from, who the hell knows. And they fall into the more is better trap by taking in egregious, copious amounts of unknown substances because some wacko influencer on Instagram told them to, or they saw it in some internet forum, and then, they get themselves all jacked up. I have seen countless, multiple people who are on crazy cycles of gear, steroids, whatever you want to call it, PEDs, and they look like shit because they're taking in way too much. They went beyond the benefit and deep into the side effects. Their diet is garbage. Their training's not very good. Their recovery sucks. They're pounding beers with their buddies on the weekends, and they're just an absolute mess. Um, there are also intelligent users that take it in at a slight physiological level, what we call super physiological level, slightly above what like a TRT or an HRT dose would be. And they find the amount where the minimum effective dose yields the best results and then doesn't cross over into the side effect realm and get themselves and their blood work completely jacked up. Yes, I talked about it in the Justin Harris interview. When people say, "Oh, are you on gear?" I'm like, dude, I'm a national level physique competitor bodybuilder that's going to nationals and trying to be one of the best, if not the best, 50 plus bodybuilders in the entire country. Yes, I am enhanced. The reason that I don't discuss dosages, and many bodybuilders do this, is because if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. You would say, "Oh, he's lying. He's taking more than that." No, because you don't need that much, especially, and this is the word that nobody ever wants to hear. Genetics are huge in this. If you've got really good genetics and you respond well to strength training, your diet is super clean and on point, you respond well to your, dialed in nutrition, you're, really focusing on recovery, getting that 8 to 9 hours sleep, you're doing everything right, and you find the minimum effective dose of a couple of compounds are going to take you into the slight physiological or into the super physiological level, then you can do exactly what I just mentioned and still be very healthy and have great blood work. On top of that, I am 57 years old, 57, and I am taking TRT like in the off season because I want to have optimized hormones, you know, properly dosed, properly prescribed. And my goal is to have my 57-year-old lower T ass having the same androgen levels as somebody that's in their 30s because I'm a competitive bodybuilder. I'm a hard strength training athlete. I'm in an industry where I want to be at my peak physical level, both internally and through strength, and also externally with having a great physique, being that freak. So people have trust and faith in somebody like me can guide them to getting them their own extreme physique. And to take in a TRT or HRT level of androgens to achieve peak health and performance, I don't understand why that gets demonized. The good thing is that we are now into a culture now where it's not demonized. It's out there now. Your favorite Marvel actor is on it. Your favorite action heroes are on it. Magazine cover models are doing some. You get, every pro bodybuilder on earth is doing it. Every top amateur bodybuilder in bodybuilding, classic physique, 212, women's physique, women's figure are on it. You might have some bikini competitors that are natural, and that's great. And you might have some regional level men's physique competitors that are natural, and that's great. And then you have people who, only compete naturally and only compete in natural federations. Also great. So you have to choose your path. I believe that my intelligent use of a small amount of HRT, even if I take it into the super physiological level, but still at a low enough dose to where it doesn't creep into the side effect realm, and my blood work is on point and I feel great and everything's operating 100%, to me, that is far better doing that and training and doing my cardio and eating super clean and getting recovery than if I was pounding liquor, taking, Massive amounts of pharmaceuticals, recreational drugs, was completely inactive, stopping at McDonald's on the way home, pounding 36 energy drinks a day, and stopping at Starbucks every morning, getting some sugar latte on the way to work. So I'm very thankful now that the use of some performing enhancing substances is more in the mainstream now. And when I mention these things, 99 out of 100 people always reply, "Oh, okay, cool. Thanks for explaining that to me." And then you get those one or two people that, "You're a cheater. You're a cheater. What the hell am I cheating at?" I'm not doing some drug tested Olympic sport. I'm doing a sport where if I don't do it and somewhat level the playing field, then I get my ass kicked. I'm not cheating in anything. I've made a personal decision that my wife is fully aware of, my children, to do these things in reasonable dosages. And I cycle it throughout the year to make sure that I maintain great health, great performance, and I operate effectively. So, yes, you can definitely do these things. I have no problem with a man that's over 40, regardless of what he's tried, still has testosterone levels at freaking 160 and feels like total dog shit and can't perform and can't do anything that a young virile man would do, chooses to walk into a TRT clinic or HRT clinic and get on a small, reasonable amount of testosterone therapy or maybe a small amount of growth hormone to make them operate as a highly functioning man or woman. I have no issue with that. And like with the dogmatic world of diet, you shouldn't be judging people that choose to do this unless they're doing it massively irresponsibly with no guidance or support and they're not getting their blood work checked. Then these people are the problem. And that's what gives it a bad name. So yeah, um, that's my view on it. And again, the overwhelming majority of the population just doesn't give a shit because the spotlight has been put on it over the last several years, and we realize that many people do, and they do at a responsible level, and they're thriving with it, and they do it in a way that their blood work is great, they're healthy as shit, and they're living the lifestyle outside of that intake of, exogenous hormones to make sure that everything is operating at peak efficiency. So there you go. Okay, I'm going to go off of my page and over to the Masters Bodybuilding Facebook group. If you're not a member, join. It's awesome. Uh, how do you know if you should lower calories versus increase cardio during a prep? Good question. I can tell you that this year in my prep, which I did very well. If you haven't heard, I won the 50 plus first place to qualify for Masters Nationals in July 2026. And I also placed second in the open light heavyweight in a pretty stacked class. Open just means it's all ages. So I'm very proud that I was able to take a second place working against guys I'm in their 20s and 30s. So I have a lot of experience with this, and anyone who's in a prep like this, needs to understand that nutrition is by far the biggest lever you can pull. Again, go back to my interview with legend prep coach Justin Harris. That's the general tone of our conversation, is it all really comes down to diet. I did very little cardio during my prep. There were weeks towards the end of prep where I might do 3 days of maybe 30 minutes and of structured cardio. Apart from that, I might do a 10-minute walk after a large meal just for digestion. There were a few times or on the weekends, just because it suited my schedule, I'd go out early in the morning, take a 30, 40-minute walk fasted, but that wasn't every weekend. It was a minor part of what I did, and I got the leanest I've ever been in my life because it was all about the food. All about the food. And when you come into that final week before that show or before whatever your goal date is, if it's a photo shoot or a family reunion or a cruise or a beach trip, and you want to make sure you're at your peak, then you'd better make sure that your macros are dialed in to a point where you're constantly removing body fat and preserving lean muscle through your protein intake and training. And when you get down to that final couple of weeks, there's really one goal: be fat free. Legend coach John Meadows made that point years back, and it was the simplest, most eloquent point, and it makes so much sense. And I echoed it through my brain, especially in the last month. Just be fat free. Because if you come into that final week where then you try to do all the tiny little adjustments to make sure that super lean physique is full and vascular and prepared to step on stage and look its absolute best, there's really not much work to be done apart from a couple of slight adjustments, which is really just a little carb up if you're low body fat. So do the work with the diet. That's where you get lean. If you have a coach that's saying go do 2 hours of cardio and you're 3 weeks out, that just meant you screwed up your diet. You didn't diet hard enough, or you got really piss poor diet advice from this coach. You didn't come in fat free, and now you got to cardio yourself to death to try to, in desperation, get the last little bit of fat off. And this oftentimes can make you look stringy and flat, over dieted, and can actually even be catabolic, and you'll waste some muscle tissue there towards the end. It's the last thing I wanted. So for me, getting 8,000 steps a day just through general activity, sprinkling in a few 30-minute cardio sessions, which was just a nice walk outside, or doing 10, 15-minute easy walks after large meals, was all the cardio I needed because my diet was dialed in. That's the most important factor. Okay. Macros are currently at 35% fat, 60% protein, 5% carbs, strict 95% carnivore. Hit a wall with losing body fat. Should I up my fat intake or keep pushing forward? I'm training hard at the gym 3 to 4 days a week, intense hypertrophy training followed by steady state cardio. The last thing I would do is raise my fat intake. Even back in the day when I did a hybrid ketogenic diet with bodybuilding, or even my hybrid cyclical carnivore diet with bodybuilding, I told everyone, I'm on record, look at my old videos from years ago. These super high fat diets, for most people, especially if you're trying to produce a badass physique, I think is the worst option you could do, especially if you're trying to get peeled. I would lower the fat considerably. I would add, at the minimum, some carbohydrate, clean, whole food carbohydrates around training, which would be the minimum effective dose. And then occasionally, if I were working with you, I would have you do occasional glycogen refeeds on certain days to replenish muscle glycogen. It's like throwing gas on a fire and keeps things moving along. Plus, that inclusion of carbohydrate is going to create a greater anabolic stimulus, and it just works better. So even my keto carnivore clients would tell you, as we got closer to stage when they're trying to get really freaking lean, guys are trying to get to sub 10% body fat, women were trying to get to like sub 18 or 16% body fat. All of them will tell you, what did I keep slowly titrating down to get leaner and leaner and leaner? I lowered the fat. I lowered the energy component, because if you're not ingesting carbs, you want your protein to energy ratio to be in a way to where your body is going to remove excess body fat. So by lowering the fat, your body knows that it now isn't taking in the same amount of fat that it used to. So now it needs to release stored body fat to make up the difference, and you get leaner. So I have never, ever in my career, which spans 31 years, have told anybody to raise their fat unless it was just way too low to the point where they weren't getting hormonal benefit. But other than that, it was always reduce the energy component as you get closer to your body composition goal, if the goal is to get super lean. So, let's see. What's the most effective way to bring up weak body parts, especially quads, during a contest prep without overtraining? Good question. I'm doing that. Hands down, my biggest weakness at this last show was, because I'm 57 years old, and the first thing to go if you're over 40 is legs, and I had taken 4 years off from bodybuilding competition. My upper body still looked really good. I am trying to bring my lat width up a little bit. I'm trying to, I've always genetically had these big, wide shoulders, which again, genetics is probably the most important factor in having that physique that commands attention. So I've always been very happy about that. But I did lose a little with the 4 years off. So I'm hitting those body parts extremely hard. But for legs, I normally did a 4 day split where I would have one dedicated leg day, still hit him really hard. But now that knowing that the one piece of the puzzle, actually, there's two pieces of the puzzle that I need to improve: leg size and posing. And I will be working on posing so hard for nationals. And I hate posing. Posing is freaking hard, but I'm going to work on that like excessively and obsessively. But for legs, I've broken up legs and went to a 5 day split. So on Monday, I'm doing chest and triceps. On Tuesday, I'm doing a quad dominant day where I'm choosing exercises that are mainly more quad dominant in the exercises. And then on Wednesday, I do back and biceps. And then on Thursday, I do a hamstring dominant leg day, also focusing on adductors, the meat between your legs. Women may want a thigh gap. That's terrible for men in bodybuilding. You want those legs so wide and so thick that your thighs are compressed together standing on stage to give you that appearance of that big leg girth, which gives you that X frame. X frame is the key. Think of the body like this. You got the wide shoulders, the small waist, and then the big legs gives you that X frame look. So I do hamstring, glutes, and adductors on Wednesday, trying to thicken up the posterior side of my legs. And then on Friday, I do a big shoulder day. I add a little bit of extra triceps, and I may throw in one or two extra lat movements just to make sure that I get the amount of frequency needed to bring up the lagging body parts and really try to produce the best physique that I possibly can, working on those couple of weaknesses that I believe were fairly glaring. And the overall consensus of people who are in the know in this world all agreed: bring up the legs and get to that same level of conditioning, and I should be able to do some damage at the 50 plus at Masters Nationals in July. So that's the goal. So my diet is not going to change very much at all. The only difference with my diet is this time around is I'm taking in considerably more food in the off season right now than I think I ever have. And I'm taking considerably more carbs than I ever have, but it's working phenomenal. My post-show rebound is going very well. I stood on stage at about 192 pounds, peeled at light heavyweight, and now after the show, I'm taking in a high volume of very clean single ingredient whole foods, training super hard in the gym. And I sit here today on camera at about 215 pounds, but I still have exposed abdominals, vascularity, and I don't look like a fat guy. And that's one more point I want to bring, even though nobody asked. In the off season, don't get fat. Don't think, I'm in a gain phase, I'm in a muscle building phase, so I'm just going to eat so much food that then you start to get fat. That's going to do you no good whatsoever, but just make it so much harder to peel that body fat off as you get closer to your goal. So my thing is, if I'm gaining, recomping muscle, I'm getting my strength back, I've got that big full look, it's not stage lean, but it's an impressive lean. So, walking around the gym in a t-shirt, it's a noticeable holy shit kind of a thing. But I never want to get to the point where I don't have exposed abs. So right now, even at 215 pounds, I have clearly defined abdominals. They're not peeled and shredded and sunk in and vascular, but they're there. And I feel confident that I could, even though it's cold as shit right now in North Carolina, if I went to the beach and took off my shirt, it would be an impressive look at my age. And that's my criteria. Don't get fat, keep exposed abdominals, keep some level of vascularity, because I wouldn't want to get, say, above, say, 13, 14% body fat at the most during the off season, because I want to have a very long runway to really peel it down and get shredded coming into the show and have plenty of time to really get it dialed in. So that's all the questions I got. There were a couple of others that were, but I'm going to do more of these Q&A videos. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was fun. Go back and watch the Justin Harris video. Hey, when I exited the carnivore world, I lost a bunch of subscribers, which is fine. If my content isn't your brand of vodka anymore, then by all means, carry on, go someplace else. But I'm trying to make that up. So if you're not a subscriber and you like the content that you're seeing here, or if you're just a very charitable, loving human being that wants to help an old guy out, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know when the next one's coming. And it really helps that algorithm if you leave somewhat of a comment, but please be nice, because personal attacks will be instantly deleted and we're all grown adults. We don't need to read that crap. So until the next time, I've got lots more content coming. We also have another Hypertrophy Underground episode coming with myself and Tyler Goins. And I have another episode of Hypertrophy Underground coming with my son, Tyler Goodwin, who is also very into the bodybuilding world and is looking to possibly compete in 2026. So, it should be lots of fun and shenanigans to see father and son sit down behind the table and have a discussion about training and bodybuilding and who the hell knows what else is going to pop up in that conversation. So look for that one. So I'll talk to you guys again real soon. I appreciate all the support, and go out there, be kind to other people, and have a fantastic day. God bless you all.